On behalf of Mass CEC and communities that may be considering running a HeatSmart or Solarize campaign in the future, I want to thank you for participating today in this interview. Our goal today is to capture your experience and the knowledge you gained from running your campaign so that it can be passed on to other communities in Massachusetts. For our viewers today that may be less familiar with Solarize and HeatSmart, these programs seek to increase the adoption of small-scale solar electricity and clean heating and cooling technologies in the participating communities through grassroots educational campaigns, which are mainly driven by local volunteers. These community-led campaigns really help simplify the process of installing clean energy systems by pre-vetting an installer and offering transparent pricing for homeowners. So now I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Charlotte Fall, and I'm the Community Clean Energy Fellow at Mass CEC, helping to develop the HeatSmart and Solarize Toolkit. I'm joined today by Bob Zogg and Brad Hubbard-Nelson, who are the HeatSmart coaches for HeatSmart Concord and Carlisle in the pilot program in 2018. I'll also mention that this campaign was a partnership between these two communities and also the town of Lincoln. So with that, let's get started. Can you quickly introduce yourselves and briefly explain your role and responsibilities in the Concord-Carlisle Lincoln HeatSmart campaign?
Yeah, I can start. I'm Bob Zogg in Carlisle, and I was the Carlisle coach for our HeatSmart campaign, and I was also the lead coach who coordinated with Mass CEC for the program.
And I'm Brad Hubbard-Nelson, a resident of Concord on our Sustainable Energy Committee, and Bob got us going with the grant proposal after we had actually an interest group for a couple of years before that. So it was a great opportunity for us to do something we wanted to do.
Prior to your HeatSmart campaign, were you involved in any clean energy or climate action initiatives?
Well, I was and continue to be on the Carlisle Energy Task Force. I'm currently the chair, and that's how I originally got connected with volunteers in Concord, I think back in 2015. And that actually wasn't the first time our two towns had tried to collaborate on promoting heat pumps, but that's when I got involved and reinvigorated the effort, and it wasn't too long after that where Brad and others joined as well. So we were already a team before the HeatSmart Mass program started.
And I could add that Concord being a municipal light plant town, we have had similar sustainability programs run by our Sustainable Energy Committee, but they've been a little bit different. They've been a little bit more really your own because we don't qualify for everything. But we had a Solarize, and we had a program, and we had a Green Your Heat program for getting people to insulate oil-heated homes. Those are a couple examples.
To help set the stage for how your team ran your HeatSmart campaign, can you tell us a little about your community? And this could include any general demographics or income level, location, size of your town.
Well, Carlisle is located northwest of Boston. We're a small town of about 5,000 people. It's really a fairly rural feeling town for being this close to Boston. We have 2-acre zoning. It's predominantly residential homes and probably upper middle income. And it's a great place to live.
Yeah, Concord is, of course, neighboring Carlisle. It's a bit bigger. It's about 17,000 people. And we definitely made use of community organizations to help us in this program. That's one of the things we did in the proposal, is getting a lot of groups like the schools, churches, things like that to aid us in running this program.
Can you tell me a little bit about your HeatSmart campaign? For example, what technologies did you choose to promote? What was your method for determining which to promote, and when and how long your campaign ran?
I think it officially ran between March and September of 2018, but really that sets up a pipeline. So in terms of what the installers were doing, and we were still meeting and paying attention all the way through the end of the year. So I would say it was a 9-month exhausting 9-month program.
Well, in the end, we ended up with 3 technologies, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, and modern wood heating systems. But interestingly enough, we started out proposing to the Mass CEC just air source heat pumps alone. And Mass CEC let us know that, gee, we're not seeing that many proposals that are including ground source and modern wood heating. And so we decided we would extend our offerings to include both of those technologies. So we ended up with all 3 in the end.
It was fortunate that we added the ground source heat pumps because of something that happened during the program where the federal government all of a sudden reinstated a huge tax credit. So that was quite fortunate that we had that in our portfolio.
Did your team set any specific goals to measure progress and success during their campaign?
We actually did set goals for ourselves and put them in our application to Mass CEC. For air source heat pumps, we set our goals in terms of the numbers of outdoor units. So these numbers are slightly higher than the number of households. We set a goal of 105 and we ended up with 49, so we got about half of our goal. For ground source heat pumps, as Brad alluded to, we had this great little help of the federal tax credit being reversed. It actually was reinstated, so that was great. We had set a goal of 9 and we got 23, so we did almost 2.5 times our goal there. And for modern wood heating, we set a goal of 8, and Concord really wasn't promoting the modern wood heating. It was primarily Lincoln and Carlisle. So we had a goal of 8 between Lincoln and Carlisle, and we ended up with just 1. So modern wood heating doesn't seem to resonate in our communities, and that's one of the lessons we learned there. But I think very importantly, that's how many installations we actually counted under the program. But I know, Brad, you've done some estimates, and we don't know for sure, but we think we might have gotten almost as many installations through indirect influence, that people were inspired by our program. So you could almost double those numbers and be pretty close to the truth.
And that's because we often suggested that people get a second quote. They could easily contact an installer and get a quote for their home, but then is that where they wanted to go? So they would call somebody else, and oftentimes it's not always based on price. It's based on who they felt they wanted to engage. So people ordered equipment from other companies.
What were a few of the most effective strategies your team utilized for marketing and outreach in your community?
I think the thing I learned is that there's no single method that works. When we, in the surveys we did, we found that people checked off a lot of different places. So I think people need to see the messaging multiple times in multiple places. The key, I think, was getting them to come to one of our events where they could really hear a little bit more and get to meet our installers. But just to get them to the events, articles, letters, lawn signs, websites, direct email lists. As Brad mentioned earlier, working through community organizations to reach out. All those were important, and it's hard to pick one that you could rely on without doing all of them. And so unfortunately, it does take multiple pathways to educate people and even make them aware of the technology.
I'd like to mention one thing, because it is hard to get people's attention. You can send them a postcard, you can send them things, but a lot of it just goes into the bin before anybody looks at it. But we did, through our high school senior class, where people have to get volunteer hours, we got one of the high school classes at Concord-Carlisle High School to write individual letters to the 1,000 homeowners which were identified in a segmentation study as being the most likely candidates. So that was something that Mass CEC helped us with through the consultant doing the segmentation study. We just sent the letters out, and those handwritten letters, I think, did a good job. So keeping your eye out for creative things you can do like that is worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Brad's making. And every community might have its own thing, but you really have to think about what really works in my community. How do people find things out in my community? And it may not be the same answer as your neighbor's community.
What did you witness as key reasons that caused residents to sign up to learn more about HeatSmart, Concord, Carlisle, Lincoln in general, and then afterwards, what motivated them to install a system?
Well, I think the key things, people have to be at a point where they're ready to make a major purchase. So if they know that their current heating system is on its last legs, or they really would like to add central air conditioning to their homes, those are really a couple of key factors that get them oriented towards heat pumps. But also they have to be, it helps to be the mindset that they really want to help decarbonize their homes. And this is really a key strategy to doing that. So combination of being at the right point in the life cycle of the equipment and having the mindset that folks really want to help decarbonize their homes are the key points, I think.
What was one of the biggest challenges you faced while running your HeatSmart campaign?
Well, we already mentioned one where the modern wood heating didn't resonate well in our communities. I think there are plenty of places where that would resonate, just not in Eastern Massachusetts. I think the other thing that was a challenge is the campaign was pretty short, and we really think we've learned that it takes an ongoing effort to be available to people, especially considering the fact that if there's a lot of life left in someone's heating system, even if they want to do the right thing, it's very difficult. It can be difficult for them to make a decision to make a change. So, um, yeah, I think the short time frame was probably the biggest challenge.
And I'll add one thing, which I don't know if you'll get to it in other questions, but having one installer per technology can be a challenge. It's rather difficult to pick them, but we got a lot of help on that and picked some good companies. But we just had one installer that was sort of the official installer for air source and for ground source, and that can set up a little bit of an anti-competitive situation where they don't listen to the customers as well as they might, and no company is perfect. So I think that's a little bit of the challenges. Was that it's a.
Did you experience any challenges due to running the campaign as a partnership between three municipalities?
Given the fact that we had a good relationship already established, that actually was a positive and not a negative in any way. I think the only minor challenge was the fact that Concord has a municipal light plant, so they have a municipal electricity supply. So their electricity costs and the incentives available for heat pumps were different than in Lincoln or Carlisle. So we did have to tailor some of our materials, and we did have to explain the differences when we had community events, but that was really a minor detail. I think the synergies we had, being able to work as a team, really helped. I know here in Carlisle, there's just no way we could have had the volunteer base to run this program on our own. And if it weren't for the help from Concord and Lincoln volunteers, we couldn't have been successful in Carlisle.
I totally agree with that.
What benefits did you experience due to running your campaign as a partnership?
I just emphasize the fact that it spreads the work out over more volunteers, and I think that's really important. I think the other big thing we didn't mention yet is the fact that the installers would be much more attracted, and probably were much more attracted to getting involved in a HeatSmart program where we had a large collective population. Attracting an installer to a town of 5,000 like Carlisle might have been very difficult to do.
What advice would you give to communities seeking to run a campaign in partnership with other communities?
Well, we did have to set up. We set up a little memorandum of understanding in the town governments, just as the way it should work, because this is something that makes the administrators more comfortable. What's our responsibility here? What's their responsibility? That has to be straightened out. But that's something that our town manager was pretty familiar with. They kind of did that pretty easily.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brad. I think that was important because there was money involved, and even though the money was coming from Mass CEC, each town had a budget, and we did need to coordinate how we spent that, and so it was important that we coordinate among the communities. But I think for me, the big thing was having the existing relationships, and knowing Brad and knowing the rest of the volunteer team really helped us get off to a fast start.
If you were running this campaign again, what is one thing you would do that you didn't do the first time?
Well, I think definitely running it on a longer term basis or even an ongoing basis is really the key thing in my view.
One of the things that we didn't succeed in, and we had the intention of, is doing a better outreach to low and moderate income families. Um, when you get busy, and we were quite busy, we did what we did. We had our public events and outreach and stuff, but I don't think we really did the some of the legwork that we could have done to do better in that other segment.
Well, that's a great idea. Do you have any tips to share or ideas that you had begun brainstorming to conduct outreach with low and moderate income?
Hmm. No, I think you just have to you have to make the effort to show up, and it might be that much more difficult to. At that time, we could have public meetings with people, uh, and we should have scheduled a couple more, uh, perhaps just for that group. But in the end, that fell through the cracks.
Do you think your HeatSmart campaign was successful in educating your community about the benefits of clean energy?
I certainly think it raised awareness quite a bit, and even people who weren't ready to act during our campaign, at least the seed was planted, and maybe subsequently they'll come to the conclusion that a heat pump is right for their home. So I do think it helped, but we're not, you know, fooling ourselves. There's a lot more awareness building left to do. Not everyone understands the benefits of heat pumps, or even what they are, or even the importance of electrification in our strategy to decarbonize. So those are all things we have a lot more work to do on.
Yeah, and I would add to that that some of the knowledge that people have about heat pumps is because they're not a totally new invention. They've been used for many years in other parts of the country. Some of that knowledge works against us, and uh, and so that needs to be keep being reinforced that hey, there are New England style heat pumps. We didn't call it that, but ones that work when it gets really cold outside.
And do you think your campaign has inspired additional climate action within your community?
Well, we can say it certainly inspired us, the volunteers, Brad and I, and many, many others at this point, to form the HeatSmart Alliance and try to continue the work. And I can say with great certainty that if it were not for the HeatSmart Mass program, the HeatSmart Alliance would not exist today. And we currently have 20 communities, volunteers in 20 communities involved with our HeatSmart Alliance program. And that is really, the HeatSmart Alliance is an effort to continue the work of HeatSmart on an ongoing basis. So we want to accelerate the adoption of heat pumps in homes across Massachusetts, and we've got many volunteers who were previously or currently are involved in HeatSmart Mass. So that's really our biggest effort to keep the ball rolling.
And what's important about that, if I might add something, is that um, there's a lot to know. And we're learning stuff every day. I'm not an energy professional. I'm a regular engineer by training. But in terms of tooling up, to how do you talk about home heating? How do you talk about heat pumps? Do they work in all circumstances? Some circumstances, things like that. There's so much to know, and continuing this work with the Alliance is a way of just leveraging more and more learning from several programs and a lot of knowledgeable people.
One of our key focuses is coaching, one-to-one coaching, and that's really a takeaway from our HeatSmart Mass program. Just understanding that people who want to do the right thing for very understandable reasons are intimidated by the process of evaluating heat pumps and trying to figure out what installer to use. And by offering one-on-one coaching, we've been able to help a lot of people make a decision. Is a heat pump right for my home? How should I get it? What heat pump should I get? What installer might I be happy with? And those are some real key questions that take some one-on-one coaching to bring people through. It's a lot of work, but it's a necessary step to help people out.
What support do you think the HeatSmart Alliance could provide for communities looking to run a HeatSmart campaign on their own?
Well, we've got one community already, Lexington, who's doing just that, and they're working with us. A couple of things we've been able to do. Not only do we have a collection of volunteers who have a lot of experience, and some of that gained through the HeatSmart Mass program, so we can transfer that experience, but we've also developed codified ways to run an event. How do you organize an event? How do you plan an event? How do you get people to show up at an event? How do you do the little things that make the event successful? As I mentioned, we've got our coaching practice, and we're doing a lot of work now to standardize our methodologies for coaching and make sure we ask people the right questions and give people the right suggestions and recommendations based on their circumstances. So working out how to do all those things and then putting those materials in a way that we easily transfer them to new volunteers and new communities, I think is one of the biggest things that we could do to help people do the same thing. And that's really what we're looking for in HeatSmart Alliance, is to really multiply our effect, to help others learn, and to learn from them too. As we bring in new communities, we learn what they know from their past experience. So really this collective learning and collective information sharing, I think, is the key thing.
And one of the things about the HeatSmart Mass program, which I think is we often forget, is the value of being able to work with the consultants that were provided at no charge to us. That was Cadmus. And I would say the HeatSmart Alliance, if we're working with a community on running a program, we kind of have to fill that role or fill a connection to the expert knowledge needed in some cases because of, difficult technical questions, stuff like that. We haven't worked out exactly how we're going to do that, but since we're all volunteers and we don't have infinite amount of time, we have to figure out, the best way the organization can help communities doing an intensive program, I would say.
Could you explain a little bit about how you had to work with the municipal light plant in order to run your campaign?
Well, we worked a little bit ahead of time during the proposal phase to make sure the light plant had the rebates that were equivalent to the investor-owned utilities. Jan Assetti at the Concord Municipal Light Plant was really very serious about pushing energy efficiency, and so she was an important member of our team. And other than that, the light plant helped with promotion. They send bills out every month to people that are in town and stuff like that. So there was a lot of stuff that happened by virtue of having that light plant.
I think that's a good point. Light plants have email lists that can get information to the community. And also they tend to have lower electricity rates, which really helps the economics for heat pumps. So it can be a real benefit to have a municipal electricity plant in a community.
Do you have any final tips for communities looking to run a HeatSmart campaign on their own? And that means without the funding and direct support you receive from Mass EEC.
If there is a community that's thinking about doing this, I'd suggest contacting the HeatSmart Alliance, getting somebody trained to be a coach, which means you have to get through understanding the basics of heat pumps and home heating and things like that. That takes a bit of time, and it's a really interesting subject. So it may be just what is needed for some people in your community.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up our interview today. I want to thank you both again so much for joining us. I think we really captured a great amount of content for our communities that are looking to run a new program themselves. So thanks again.